Rachel, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you coming by to talk about your experience of becoming Catholic and your experience of RCIA at St. Stephen Catholic Community. Let's begin by hearing a little bit about your faith background. Tell us where you come from as a Christian.
Okay. So I grew up in a very faithful Church of Christ home, which is a Protestant denomination. They would consider themselves non-denominational. I loved it, really. I mean, I felt very strongly connected to God even as a young girl. I guess, too, with my background, so as an editor and primarily of Christian literature for the, after I left college and on, I was exposed to a lot of different theology and a lot of different Christians. And so my idea of what a Christian is and who a Christian is kind of expanded. I had struggled my way into reading my Bible every day and trying to find more spiritual discipline in my life and making my faith mine and making my faith real and what I had been given as a child, trying to grow that into maturity. And I just kind of felt really heavy on my heart after, I would say it was like, maybe this was 4 or 5 years ago, that God had a place for me, but it wasn't quite where I was at that time. But I didn't know where I was supposed to be either. When I first walked into your office and I was like, I want to figure out what RCIA is about. About a month before that moment, I had been to Mass for the first time since I was a little girl. And I had gone, when I was a little girl, I went with my grandparents a few times. But I hadn't been to a Mass in well over 20 years. Like, I had definitely been open to God taking me to a different church or not taking me out of the faith, out of Christ, but I was very open to God taking me to where he wanted me to be. I was blown away. I remember like having this moment where like watching the Eucharist, where I had no idea what I was really watching or what was happening, and I was very nervous. And I remember like looking up at the altar, and I didn't know what the priest was doing, but I remember very vividly seeing Jesus there, and knowing he was there in that room.
Are you meaning seeing Jesus like in the Eucharist during the consecration, or the presence of Christ on the altar?
No, like I don't even really know how to explain it. I saw like Jesus above the altar, like not in the bread, but above, like as like there. I don't really know how to explain that. Yeah. And I just knew that was him, and that gave me a real sense of peace that what I had known about the Catholic faith was not very much, to be honest, and a lot of it was kind of negative. So knowing that he was there at least opened me up to exploring it and with an open heart. So I would say it was a lot of things, but the Holy that brought me here. But I think the main thing is that the Holy Spirit really opened my heart.
The first thing I do when we open with a new group, when I have the opportunity, which is pretty much every year, almost every time, I've opened our whole catechetical season with quoting John 3:16, "For God so loved the world." And one of the things that I've learned is that many Christians of other Protestant denominations don't consider that Catholics are Christians at all. So the fact that you have this vision of Christ above the altar basically gave you confidence to move forward in an inquiry about maybe becoming a Catholic.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I was, without knowing a whole lot about it, like I look back at who I was at that point and what I thought about Catholicism, and all I really thought was Catholics worship Mary. That's what I'd been told. Mm-hmm. And, Catholics basically follow the Pope instead of following Jesus, and more of a cult practice than I just didn't know a lot about it. So I had very limited knowledge. And that knowledge was, that I would say you're definitely correct, that it gave me a sense of peace that, okay, this is not the cult practice thing that I thought it was, and that it is okay to follow Jesus here.
And these other subjects that you mentioned are common misconceptions.
Yeah.
Someone who's not baptized may arrive with less preconceptions about the Catholic faith, or Catholic Christianity, but a Protestant Christian is more likely to arrive with some misconceptions. We do try to address those things.
Yeah.
Over the course of RCIA. We come to all of those things that might be theological, roadblocks for a good Protestant who wants to become Catholic.
And I underwent that on my own time too, just like looking in. I definitely wanted both perspectives. So when I started this journey, I was at RCIA, but on my own, I went to the library and got Catholic theology from the Protestant perspective, like the Catholic who has left and become a Protestant. So I read that book, and then I read the book about the Protestant who became a Catholic. So,
Right.
Two different versions of that story to look at those questions I had. And RCI helped a ton because you have like a safe space to ask those questions. And I did. I remember asking the priest in RCIA, and I was like, I don't even know if this is rude. And I don't mean for it to be, but like, do you go to confession too? Being able to ask those questions and feel safe to ask those questions is incredibly important.
So that brings me to a question I really wanted to ask. I get to be a witness to your faith journey, which is one of the privileges of being on the RCIA team. But I don't know the answer to this, and I was curious about it. What was the final thing that at the end of the day, you're trying to decide if you're going to become a Catholic Christian or you're going to stay in the Protestant world? Was there one thing that was a final discernment point for you?
So I really took a step back for a while and, tried to pray about it, and really kind of fell into like a dark depression almost, where I was just like, I just felt like my foundation was gone. And that was a really scary time, but I'm glad God walked me through that, because it allowed me to rebuild on something that I think is really solid. And so no, there wasn't this like moment, but there was this like there wasn't a day that I can pinpoint, but there was something that kind of gelled in my head as I was, praying through this and journaling through this and, taking long walks and talking to God about all these things. And there was something I kept circling back to, and that was the idea of like, where else do I go? I didn't want to miss out on having the full faith experience. I didn't want to miss out on having more of Jesus, if I could have more of Jesus. And I didn't want to miss out on like seeing him in this world in a bigger way than I had experienced before. And that's what it came down to, is like, I want to step forward in this because I don't know where else to go. I could go back to what I was doing, but I know what I'd be missing out on. Yeah, and that's definitely how I viewed it. It was, I could, go back to what was more comfortable and what I knew, but I knew I was missing out.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to miss out if I didn't have to, and I felt like God was giving me that opportunity.
So I'd like to say, for the sake of whoever may be watching now, that when you came to us, you've already spoken about how thoroughly you read and how completely you research a subject when you become interested in it or drawn to it. And by the time you and I began talking, you were already well along theologically to thinking, maybe God is calling me here to this Catholic Church. You were already far along in that. And matter of fact, you were among those that I've met through the years that showed up really well formed in Catholic faith and Catholic theology. And of course, we also recognize your gifts as a communicator and as a teacher and as a catechist, so much so that we've invited you to join our RCIA team. So you are now not only a past participant in our RCIA process, but now you are helping us to implement. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you see that developing over time?
For me, I feel like when I look back at my past and look back in my career as an editor and in Christian publishing primarily, and how that exposed me to a lot of beautiful writing, and then my career in writing and being able to learn to communicate, my degrees in English, like just having that very focused track, like God led me, I think, without me even realizing it sometimes, to the path. And so I guess I don't know where the future is going. But in retrospect, I see how God has like weaved everything together at the right time and used talents, in the right way and for the right reason. And I'm just kind of clinging to that at every opportunity, just like say yes to the next thing that God opens up and let him guide how you're going to use what he's given you.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask, is there anything that God is doing particularly in your life right now that you wanted to just share with us before we close?
Within the religious world, if you've been in it for any length of time, you see the division and how people disagree. And I found the unity incredibly attractive and who I thought Jesus wanted the church to be whenever he defined it. One of the things that I see God doing in me is teaching me to accept his path and his approval, and whatever criticism that you might get for being on God's path for you, if you can learn to set that aside and just realize that it is okay if he's okay with you. I feel like that's one of the biggest lessons of my life right now that I'm in the middle of learning. And I think if I can get to that place of like really being at peace with how God thinks of me and how God sees me and how he feels about me, I think that's going to open up my heart to experiencing that true freedom that he talked about and being able to invite others into that freedom as well, so that we can all just really be on God's path for us.
Perfect. Rachel, thank you for today. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.